Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon of the Chabad House of Delmar, and we're going to be reading some interesting essays today from the book called The Jewish Matters, a pocketbook of knowledge and inspiration. Now this is very important. It's a little bit personal to me also because I'm sure people haven't heard of them, the Targum Press. It's a Jewish, they print up many Jewish books, but when my cousin married the Miriam Simon, my name is Rabbi Simon, married Rabbi Moshe Dambi, and he just passed away recently, and was a young man, and unfortunate for him, let this show be in his honor and his memory, because he was the publisher of this book, and that's why I wanted to share it. Besides that, I mean, there's very interesting essays in here, and therefore I wanted to read them with you and share the ideas. Now, the chosen people, and this is going to deal with that the Jewish people are the chosen people, and what we're going to say now, most Christian people believe, which is most people in the world do believe these ideas, but there's a lack of understanding exactly what the chosen people is. So therefore, I just, of course, wanted to share these point of view. This from an ancient author, Nathan Lopez Cardoza. Actually, I mean, I don't know if you heard of the incredible, the author of this, but he lived hundreds of years ago. Maybe people are familiar with the Cardoza Law School. I mean, the law school was named after him in Manhattan. My son actually goes to that law school, but in any case, he's a great man in his own right. And we're going to see from this essay that he really was. The chosen claim. One of the most disturbing claims ever made by any group of people is the ones Jews make. When quoting the Bible, they insist on being the chosen people. For nearly 4,000 years, Jews have upheld the belief that they are God's select, the apple of his eye, his most beloved and favored nation. Superficially, this claim sounds like prejudice of the highest order, making the vast majority of mankind into second-class citizens. Aside from biblical references, the Jewish tradition itself has emphasized Jewish particularity and the need to build thicker walls between Jews and non-Jews. Jews are not to marry non-Jews. Judaism does not missionize or go out to win converts. Rather, it discourages all but the most sincere. Kosher food laws themselves limit social interaction. Even when living amidst their non-Jewish neighbors, Jews have also always striven to live on their own, dressing differently, speaking their own language, and abiding by their own unique customs, prayers, and culture. The famous English author George Bernard Shaw accused the Jews of arrogance and said as long as they have insisted upon their choosiness, they have no right to object to the monstrous way the Germans had killed 6 million of their people. They had brought it on themselves. H.G. Wells called the Jewish claim a hindrance to world unity. Protestant theologians spoke about the haughtiness of Jewish belief. With all this said, it may strike us as paradoxical that traditional Judaism has gone out of its way to stress the dignity of the entire human race. When reading the creation chapter, long before the Jews were created, we are told that all men were created in the image of God. The prophet's words are clear from the Malachi. Have we not all one Father? Has not one God created us? In Talmudic times, Rabbi Meir stated that Adam was created from dust that had been collected from all corners of the earth, so that no one nation could claim the distinction of being better or having been created mankind. While not encouraging conversion, Judaism does insist that all people can become Jews. Some of the greatest Jews in history were converts or descendants of converts. The great King David comes from the line of Ruth. Perhaps our most famous convert, see the book of Ruth. Rabbi Akiva, Shammai, and Avtalion, some of the greatest sages in our tradition from the Talmud, all trace themselves to converted forefathers. The famous commentator and sage Onkelos was the Roman emperor's nephew, when he converted, we are thus confronted with the most amazing situation. On the one hand, we have observed how much Judaism wants to secure the Jewish people's uniqueness and chooseness. And on the other hand, we are told that the equality of all men, the dignity of all human beings, is the cornerstone upon which all traditional Judaism stands. Before trying to address this paradox, we must ask an important question. Does historical reality confirm the unique status of the Jewish people and even its choiceness? Our answer must be stated clearly, yes. The cold historical facts prove that the Jewish people stand out in three matters. One, they experienced a most miraculous survival. Two, they have made incredible contributions to civilization, totally out of proportion with their numbers. Three, they made a totally unprecedented return to their homeland after nearly 2,000 years of exile. One, their survival. In biblical times, the Jews were surrounded by enemies who were committed to destroy them. They had to wage war after war to survive. Afterwards, they were sent into their longest exile. Beaten, killed, tortured, they were expelled from one country to another, only to find another disaster awaiting them. They became the scapegoat for national and social problems. Still, they survived. Discriminated against, consistently outlawed, the oldest nation on the planet, the Jews, were constantly dying, yet never died. Outlasting all their enemies, they violated all the sophisticated rules of history, and for this reason became either the most annoying or the most celebrated people in the world. Now, their contributions. The Jewish people brought monotheism to the world, the most powerful idea man has ever heard. Since that day, the universe has never been the same. The gift of the Bible turned all deeds into moral actions, teaching ethics and justice. Neither Christianity nor Islam would exist without the Jews. Based on the book, no international or American law would be what it is today without them. In later centuries, Jews contributed to science, literature, music, finance, medicine, and art, all beyond anyone's expectations of a small, tortured people. They were involved in many social revolutions, often becoming the leaders and thinkers. They have produced great rabbis and sages, and even those who were on the road to assimilation revolutionized the world. Spinoza, Freud, Einstein, and Marx. The return. Not only did the Jews manage to survive in the face of all their sufferings and make great contributions to the world, but they even managed to free themselves of the nearly 2,000-year exile to return to the land of their forefathers. Just moments after they had experienced the worst destruction, the Holocaust Jews picked up their bags and went home. At a time when the whole world declared that there was no longer a future for the Jew, the state of Israel appeared as if from nowhere. The Jewish return to their homeland was a totally unprecedented event. No nation after such a long, painful exile has successfully returned to its homeland and built a completely modern state. It is a phenomenon totally unheard of, violating all principles of conformity. The first Jew. Having observed all this, we may confidently state that the Jews are indeed a nation apart. Their uniqueness is beyond question, but we must ask, does this have anything to do with the biblical claim of choosiness? To answer this, we must return to the Bible itself in Genesis chapter 11. The generation of the Tower of Babel represented a low point in human history. They sought to build a tower high enough to reach the heavens and challenge God. For the first time, a whole generation stood up and rebelled against God as a matter of principle. While earlier generations had done much evil, they understood their actions were evil. The Tower's generation, however, brought a new ideology into the world, one of extreme secularism in which God was deliberately ignored. This new belief system saw nothing wrong with immorality it elevated it to the New World Order. Abraham understood the inherent dangers of an ideology in which God was exiled and where immorality, corruption, and sexual depravity became the norm. He became known in the world as Abraham the Ivri, the Hebrew. Ivri conveys the idea of crossing a road, standing on the other side. The Jewish tradition explains, the whole world stands on one side and Abraham on the other. Abraham taught the world exactly what it did not want to hear. The most important thing in life is not what one has, but what one is. He asks his people to do that which is just and right, to move towards their spiritual potential. This became the great mission of his life, for the life of his partner Sarah, and of all his descendants. All moral revolutions are based on this first one. The nation that was in the process of being built was to become the guilty conscience of the world. As Jacques Maritain remarked, the Jews gave the world no peace. They bar slumber. They teach the world to be discontented and restless as long as the world has no God. The famous medieval commentary Sepharno noted that Abraham called for a kingdom of priests, charged with the task of instructing and teaching the whole of mankind of the centrality of God and the importance of kindness and giving. We can now understand more clearly our original question concerning the paradox between chooseness and universalism. The chooseness of the Jews is not a superiority-based selection at all like that of the Nazis, who believed that they were to be served by the rest of mankind. The Jews understood themselves to be the servants of mankind, a chosen messenger with a universalistic message. But the particularistic aspects of the Jewish people help ensure that there will be a strong messengers generation after generation. Without young messengers, there can be no strong message. Yet the goal is universal. Jews are moral protesters who understand their task as bringing the great ethical teachings of pure ethical monotheism to the entire world. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. When we have time for a few more, I wanted to get into this idea, which is really probably one of the top questions that people ask me, and it's on their mind, is the difference between science and religion, or the great controversy between science and religion. And immediately I tell them, and we're going to get into this as a very big thinker, that there really is no conflict. They're complementary. How could this be? You see that there's billions of years that the world was created when you open a science book, and we know the creation story took 6 days. How do you rectify the differences? Well, this person, I read his full book, and this is just a short essay. It's only going to take a little bit of time, but again, if anybody wants to read more, this is from Gerald Schroeder. And actually, that of course, we transmit from the library. You can't actually get it from the library. Of course, you can buy it yourself. The name is The Genesis and the Big Bang, and also The Science of God. And these are very beautiful books, and we're going to excerpt them one, The Great Science Bible Debate. Creation is in the news almost daily. Not the original Genesis account of creation, but the 20th century version, the Big Bang. Skeptics and believers alike want to know if the biblical description of our cosmic origins can jive with the scientific account. There's no way, I'm told, we can squeeze 15 billion years of cosmology into the 6 days of creation, chapter 1. And then there is a biblical calendar that reports God creating mankind less than 6,000 years ago. Haven't I heard of the Cro-Magnon Homo sapien fossils from 50,000 years ago, I'm asked? On the first question, there is a way, and on the second question, I have heard of him. Here are the questions I'm asked most frequently, and the replies I'm able to provide while standing on one foot. Creation. Yes, creation. Today we call it the Big Bang. In the early 1600s, James Ussher, Archbishop of Armagh, Ireland, calculated that the creation of the world took place in the year 4004 BCE on October 23rd. At high noon. Sounds silly, such precision, and then why should a cleric know about cosmology? And so, not surprisingly, a contemporary of Ussher, the famous astronomer Johannes Kepler, sought to correct him. Kepler is a scientist who discovered that planets move about the sun in elliptical orbits and not circles, as had been previously assumed. He knew more than just a bit about the world around us. Kepler calculated that the creation was not in October 4004 BCE, but in the spring of that year. Today, their use of the Bible as a tool for cosmological inquiry may seem mightily misplaced. So let me put their error in perspective. In 1959, a survey was taken among leading United States scientists. Among the questions was one querying their estimate of the age of the universe. Of those who replied, the large majority, in fact 2/3, responded, age? There is no age. The universe is eternal. Plato and Aristotle taught us that. 6 years later, in 1965, with Penzias and Wilson's discovery of the radiation remnant of the Big Bang, that fundamental paradigm changed. Science had discovered the echo of our creation. There was a beginning to our wonderful universe. Questions may arise as to the details of that beginning and whether there are other universes. But the overwhelming evidence is that some 15 billion years ago, the time, space, matter, and laws of nature that made up our universe came into being from what appears to be absolute nothingness. Human logic and scientific belief has sided with the Greek view of the universe, but it was an error. The 3,000-year-old claim of Genesis 1:1 that there had been a creation from void had been proven correct. For all the chortling about the exaggerated exactness of Ussher and Kepler, they have been infinitely closer to the truth than the majority of scientists in that 1959 survey. Make no mistake about it, science has taken the largest step it has ever taken in closing ranks with the Bible. It has confirmed the first part of the first sentence of the Torah. There was a beginning. Was a day back then at the beginning? It's a good question. Genesis chapter 1 recounts for us the 6 days of creation. Day by day the key events are ticked off, but wait, the sun does not appear till day number 4. So how could there have been days before then? All ancient commentaries who deal with the meaning of day during the creation week tell us that the term day refers to a duration of time, and that duration was 24 hours regardless of whether or not there was a sun. Those first 6 days, we are told, were no longer than the 6 days of our work week. But the commentaries continue, those 6 days contain all the ages and all the secrets of the universe. Days containing ages? Sounds strange. Nevertheless, that is what we twice read in Genesis. Quote, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the eternal God made heaven and earth." And again, this is the book of the generations of Adam in the day that God created Adam. Generations within a day? It took an Einstein to discover how that could happen. The laws of relativity taught the world that the passage of time and the perception of time's flow varies from place to place in our most amazing universe. A minute on the moon passes more rapidly than a minute on the earth. A minute on the sun passes more slowly. The duration between the ticks of a clock, the beats of a heart, the time to ripen oranges stretches and shrinks. Wherever you are, time seems normal because your body is in tune with your local environment. Only when looking across boundaries to very different locations can we observe the relativity of time. It is a phenomenon that has been confirmed a myriad of times in laboratories around the world. We look back in time studying the history of the universe. From our vantage, we find billions of years have passed. And they did. But to understand the opening chapter of Genesis, we must identify its perspective of time. Again, the ancient commentators, why, they asked, is the end of the first day recorded as, and there was evening and there was morning, day one, and not a first day. The remaining days are recorded as second, third. One is absolute. First is comparative. The Bible states that day one to teach that this day is near the beginning, the time when the first stable matter formed from the energy of the Big Bang. It was a moment when no other time existed. By the second day, there was already the previous day with which to compare it, and hence the statement, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day. A second relative to the first day. Viewing the events of our unfolding universe from that beginning holds the answer as to how our generations fit into those days. The universe we live in is not static. It is expanding. The space of the universe is actually stretching. If we took a mental trip back in time, sending our information back to the moment from which Genesis views time, the effect of our mental trip would to be passed to a time that when the universe was vastly smaller. In fact, a million times smaller than it is today. Space would have shrunk a million-fold. This huge God of space would equally compress the perception of time for any series of events. To calculate the effect of that million compression, we must divide the 15 billion years we observe looking back in time by the million. The result, a mere 6 days passed as viewed from the beginning, which of course is just what Genesis chapter 1 had been claiming for the past 3,000 years. Genesis and the science of cosmology tell the same account, but seen from vastly different perspectives. Evolution in the Bible? You've got to be kidding. No, the Bible is well aware of evolution, or to be politically safe, let's call it development. But the Bible is not very interested in the details in the process, and so it describes all of animal evolution in a mere 7 sentences. Genesis tells us simple aquatic animals were followed by land animals, mammals, and finally humans. That is also what the fossil record tells us, but of course with much more detail than these few biblical verses provide. While the Bible has no problem with the development of life from simple forms to the more complex, Neo-Darwinian theory, gradual evolution, through random genetic mutation selected for or against by environmental conditions, has many. First came the discovery that life appeared on the Earth almost 4 billion years ago, immediately after the molten globe has cooled sufficiently for liquid water to form. This contradicted totally the theory of life's gradual evolution over billions of years in some nutrient-rich pool. The rapid origin of life remains a mystery. Then we learned that some 550 million years ago, in what is known as a Cambrian explosion of animal life, every basic body plan has ever existed burst upon the scene, with no foreboding in the underlying fossil record. It is no wonder that Darwin, in his Origin of Species, repeatedly implores the reader 7 times, by my account, to ignore the fossil record if we wish to understand his theory. Taking the data as a whole, the evidence for a purposeful force, God, helping evolution along is about as strong as the evidence for random mutations coupled with natural selections being the force behind the process. Either way, something exotic is at work. The Bible's calendar puts the creation of Adam at about 6,000 years ago. Science says the number should be closer to 60,000 years. So who's right? Let's not confuse man with human. The biblical creation of Adam, humankind, relates to the creation of the human soul, in Hebrew, neshama, and not the human body. The 1,500-year-old Talmud is replete with descriptions of humanoids having the same shape and intelligence as humans. But they were not human. They lacked a neshama, a soul. Recall that the Talmud redacted a millennium before paleontology raised the scientific question of pre-human humanoids. The Talmud learns of humanoids from nuances in the text of Genesis. Science has confirmed the ancient predictions of Genesis. Maybe more a coincidence than museums make the break between prehistory and history at about 6,000 years ago with the invention of writing. Necessity is the mother of invention. The sudden expansion of clan-sized settlements into cities necessitated commerce and administration, which in turn required record-keeping and hence writing. What is the creation of the neshama that enabled clans to reach out and join together into cities? This is a question unanswerable by science. If God wrote the Bible, why doesn't it mention dinosaurs? In a way, the Bible does mention dinosaurs, if not dinosaurs, then large reptiles, which is what dinosaurs were. In Genesis 1:21, we learn that God created the big Taninim. This is the only animal in the entire creation account with a size attributed to it. Taninim are occasionally translated as whales, crocodiles, lizards, even dragons. The confusion over the meaning of Taninim is surprising, since Tanim, the single of Taninim, is a word known in the Torah. In Exodus chapter 3, God spoke to Moses from the burning bush, telling him to return to Egypt to lead the Jews to freedom. Moses asked God for a sign, and his shepherd's staff turned into a snake, Nachash in Hebrew. When Moses used the sign in front of Pharaoh, the staff became a Tanim, which a few verses later was referred to as a Nachash, snake. We learn from this that Tanim is a general category within which Nachash falls. The general category for snakes is reptiles. Genesis 1:21 reads that God created the big reptiles. Dinosaurs were certainly big reptiles. Who started this whole controversy between Bible and science? If I had to choose a single source for this travesty, I would be forced to lay the blame on the religious community. Theologians who have the scantest scientific knowledges are willing to trash every scientific discovery related to the cosmos or the development of life that seems to encroach upon some imagined sacred turf. First, Copernicus in the 1500s had the audacity to suggest that the earth moved around the sun. This was unacceptable to the religious establishment, notwithstanding that the opening sentence of the Bible places the heavens before the earth. 100 years later, Kepler shook the religious rule with his discovery that the earth moves in an eclipse. This humiliated the clergy. Would not a perfect God produce a perfectly circular orbit? The next century brought Newton and the laws of inertial motion. It must have come as a bolt out of the blue for him to find he was accused of bringing occult qualities that were subversive to reveal religion. What subversion? One would have to search far and wide today to find a cleric who was against the laws of motion. But with each stage, the popular impression was that science had proven the Bible wrong, notwithstanding the fact that the Bible had made no claims in any of these fields. Just to conclude, the topics of the controversy have changed, but the claims remain. Today it is dinosaurs and cavemen in a world so oriented towards science. It would bode well if the clergy had an inkling of what the claims of science really are. As Maimonides wrote 800 years ago in the introduction to the Guide for the Perplexed, the only path to knowing God is through the study of science, and for that reason the Bible starts with a description of the creation. Thank you very much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and we're talking a book that Jewish Matters, a pocketbook of knowledge and inspiration, and I wanted to just bring two essays from it and relate them to you, but they're from two Jewish women. I mean, of course, they're beautiful in their own right, but I just wanted to, as a side note, but an important note in its own right, is just say that Jewish women are also thinkers, just to preclude the thought that many people think Orthodox and Hasidic women are, all they do is busy in the kitchen and take care of the kids. They're very intelligent women. They have a good education and background, and especially in Judaism, and they could write very interesting and very deep ideas. So therefore, today we're going to have two discourses of two very interesting ideas about Shabbos and what really Shabbos is. Many people think that Shabbos is, oh man, a day off and I can't go to the football game or the movies, etc., etc. Very boring. Well, we're going to talk about two ideas today. One is about the Shabbos, and the second thing that people feel that's very, very boring is prayer. And of course, both the Sabbath and both prayer are not at all very boring. They're very spiritually exciting. And it very hurts me when people say, oh, that's boring, because they really are not in tune at all of what the Sabbath is and what prayer is. So that's why I felt today was very important to discuss these two issues. And again, as a side note, it's not important really either for men and for women, but these are both written by women people. Disconnecting Myself by Rivka Slonim. New friends are puzzled, even dismayed when they hear about the way I observe Shabbos, the Saturday. They are bewildered to learn that I do not write, flip an electric switch, use the telephone, cook, or engage in a host of assorted everyday activities for 25 hours each week, starting Friday night at sunset until Saturday at nightfall. After the brief pocket in time, I am back rushing to the same beat we all recognize. No one who sees me in the throes of the hurry, which defines my life, would ever believe I take such a prolonged hiatus on such a regular basis. How can you afford to do that, they ask, when they hear that my observance also precludes shopping, theater going, and a wide gamut of recreational activities? The question turns shrill. Why would you want to do that? This line of questioning is not at all surprising. It flows quite naturally from the assumption that to cease from our everyday pursuits on a regular basis is not only difficult, but impossible. Think of the advertisements we see on the mountain climber perched precariously as he logs on with his laptop to check his mail, or the sunbather on a remote island clinching a deal in communication with the office. Now think again, the time of the advertisements for the Club Med vacation options, these coveted holiday packages for the rich and elite. What distinguishes these getaways from all others is more than the lusciousness of the remote islands, the exotic food and entertainment of extravagance accommodations. It is yet a removal they offer from the everyday din and commotion. The plug is pulled on phones, fax, and email. What a phenomenon! And that's what I experience each week when on Friday, just as the sun is about to set, I disconnect myself from the everyday summonses. I light the Shabbos candles and something changes as I clear my mind of the craziness of the week and take a deep breath. I know I am in a place to which I could never have arrived on my own. 6 days of work. The fourth of the 10 Commandments state in Exodus, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. You shall work during the 6 weekdays and do all your tasks. But Saturday is the Sabbath to God your Lord. Do not do anything that constitutes work. There is an indication here that resting on Shabbos is intrinsically connected to, even contingent upon, the work we do during the week. To understand the nature of man's work, we go back to the beginning, even before Genesis.